All right, folks, I think we're about ready to get started. Thanks very much for coming. My name is Blair Bobier. I'm one of the original members of the Pacific Green Party here in Oregon. I live here in Benton County, or as I like to refer to it, the Greater Philomath Metropolitan Area. So how many folks are not Pacific Green Party members here? Who is not? Okay. Halfway? Okay, do you want to be a Pacific Green Party member? You should be, I'll tell you what. So if you could raise your hands again, please. Two ladies in the back. Let's pass a couple of, and the third, the gentleman. So you don't have to do this now, but after you hear Dr. Stein talk, you're going to be begging for a pen to fill out that card and change your registration. Anne, did you raise your hand as well? Okay. Did I miss anyone? Let's see. Someone in the middle. Someone in the middle. She's just waving. Registration card? Okay. So for a handful of folks who maybe don't know about the Pacific Green Party, I'd just like to tell you that we've been organizing for 3 decades here in Oregon. We've been on the ballot since the early 90s. We are focused around 4 core principles of peace, democracy, sustainability, which one did I leave out? And justice. Internationally, the Green Party is successful in a number of parliaments throughout the world where Greens are not just in parliament but hold ministerial positions. Not too long ago, the Greens had a tremendous victory in Germany where they handed Angela Merkel's party a defeat in her home state, and that led to Germany phasing out nuclear power. Closer to home, Greens have been elected to the Salem and Ashland city councils. The mayor of Mosier, Oregon is a Green. There's Greens on some other small town city councils, and we have 2 elected Greens on the city council here in Corvallis. Mike, right over here, and Richard Hervey, right over there, and also Matt Donahue on the school board. So first of all, let's recognize our elected. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your service. What some people may not know is that our existence in Oregon is threatened by the rather convoluted ballot access laws of the state, which is why it's all the more important to register green. According to the Secretary of State's office, if we don't register approximately another 1,600 people to vote within our party, we will disappear before the November election. We happen to take a different view of that, and today Dr. Stein and I in Portland and in Salem announced that we'll be filing a lawsuit. The Pacific Green Party and Seth Woolley, who's a candidate for Secretary of State, will be filing a lawsuit against the Secretary of State for the arbitrary enforcement of the state's ballot access laws. I'd like to point out that our ballot here in Oregon has provided a platform not just for some wonderful local candidates, but for some great national activists. David Cobb, who recently delivered the Linus Pauling
Memorial Lecture for World Peace.
Thank you. David Cobb, our presidential candidate from 2004. David and I worked together to put forth the Ohio recount. We put him on the ballot. We put Nader on the ballot twice. And in 2000, Ralph Nader got the highest percentage of the vote here in Oregon. Cynthia McKinney, former Congresswoman, great activist, was our presidential candidate the last time around. And all that is threatened if we don't get on the ballot. So please register to vote green. Help us stay on the ballot. Today it's been my distinct pleasure to travel in the company of Dr. Jill Stein. As we had a press conference in Portland this morning, the Oregonian showed up, Channel 12 and KXL Radio, so hopefully we'll see something in the Oregonian tomorrow. We had a press conference in Salem, and the Statesman Journal and OPB were there, so we've gotten some great coverage, and we just met with Mike McAnally and Teresa Novak from the GT. So Dr. Stein has knocked herself out here on this one day so far in Oregon. Jill Stein holds both undergraduate and medical degrees from Harvard. She's a mother, a housewife, a physician, a teacher, and a pioneering environmental health advocate. Dr. Stein is the co-author of 2 widely praised reports, In Harm's Way, Toxic Threats to Child Development, and Environmental Threats to Healthy Aging. Dr. Stein has appeared as an expert on a number of television and broadcast programs, including The Today Show, 2020, and Fox News. Can't always pick where you appear. Her efforts to protect public health have won awards a number of them, including the Clean Water Action's Not in Anyone's Backyard Award, the Children's Health Hero Award, and the Toxic Action Center's Citizen Award. Dr. Stein has run for office several times, including most notably a run for governor in 2002 in her home state of Massachusetts, where she debated Mitt Romney, was declared the winner of the debate by more than one press outlet, and one journalist described her as the only adult in the room. That's condensing an awfully long and very storied career into just a little bit, and if you go to jillstein.org, you can find out more. But we have a doctor here with a prescription for what ails this nation. Please welcome Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so much, Blair. It's been my pleasure and honor to be traveling around with you and really seeing some of the wonders of the greater Portland area, and bringing out the press, which you did an amazing job of. So it's really been wonderful, and thank you all for coming out on this beautiful afternoon. People say to me, what's a nice doctor like you doing in a godforsaken place like the presidential race? And I say, well, I'm practicing political medicine now, because it's the mother of all illnesses, and until we fix that one, we're not going to fix the others. But seriously, you know, this is just an incredibly exciting moment, and it's been an unbelievably exciting campaign, and it's just beginning. I heard today, for example, that we just got time on NBC News live tomorrow in Chicago as part of the NATO protests. So this is going to be our first breakthrough into big corporate media. So, you know, and still it's many months to go in the election, so it's very exciting. And what I can tell you in no uncertain terms is that the rebellion is in full swing. It's under the radar right now, but it's really happening. And in so many ways we are seeing this movement for democracy and justice breaking out all around us, from the democracy revolutions in the Middle East, the uprisings in Wisconsin, the Occupy protests, the student strikes all over the nation. And at the same time that people are, or should I say, at the same time that democracy is breaking out, people are also breaking away from the establishment political parties in record numbers. I know this from all kinds of polls, as well as from party registration, that you know, that people are waking up in a big way. And you put two and two together, and it says that in this election we have, you know, an incredible opportunity to make this a very powerful tipping point to take back our democracy and the kind of future that we deserve, a peaceful, just, green future. And in fact, we need this tipping point right now, because in so many ways we've hit the breaking point for people, for the planet, for our economy, and for our democracy. And we didn't get here by accident. We got here basically with two political parties, the two wings of the political establishment that have both delivered crisis after crisis. And nobody has made this clearer than our current president, Barack Obama, who in so many ways has actually embraced the policies of George Bush, and then actually gone beyond what Bush was able to get away with. I'm just going to run through the litany really quick, because you're going to find yourself having this debate with a lot of our progressive, community-minded friends and colleagues. Are some people finding you're having this debate? Yeah, in a big way. So nothing like the facts, although often the facts aren't enough, but they're at least a point of departure. So I just want to run through the record to have, you know, have put it on the table, and to jog your memory when you're in these conversations too, to be able to point out, you know, kind of where we've gotten with both wings of this political establishment. So on the Wall Street bailouts, it was $700 billion under George Bush, but it's about $16 trillion under Barack Obama. On the layoffs for workers, the offshoring of jobs, and the undermining of wages, which continue to slide down by the day. They continue going down, and there is no sign on the horizon that they are changing direction. You know, this is in part due to the free trade agreements, which have just been expanded by Barack Obama, including to, you know, to Colombia, where workers are at particular disadvantage with the war against unions and the incredible bloody campaign being waged against unions in Colombia. This is the kind of competition that American workers are being, thrust into. The attacks on Medicare and Social Security, as well as Medicaid, and in fact that was what prompted me to get involved in national politics. I've always been active at the local and state level, but when I heard Barack Obama putting Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid on the chopping block as the solution to the debt ceiling crisis, which itself was a concocted crisis that shouldn't have existed, that should have been negotiated during the extension of the Bush tax cuts, for example. There could have been something asked in return. Here we were in this debt crisis that could have been avoided. It was being used as an excuse now to undermine our basic social infrastructure. At that point, I became involved with the National Party for the first time, and it was sort of my wake-up that, oh, so this is why we have a National Party. Because many of us, get very focused on the work we need to do at the local and state level. It's very hard to work at all those levels simultaneously, but for me that was like the big moment of appreciation for why we're also working to be a national party, because it was going to be Greens or nobody who would challenge that proposition that we dismantle Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid. So at that point I became involved to try to help try to recruit someone who would be willing to run for president, and got recruited in the process. But at any rate, running through that litany, the epidemic of foreclosures, which continues absolutely unabated, 6 million families that have lost their home, 12 million homeowners are at risk, and essentially nothing has been done, nothing. And the expanding war effort, you're probably aware of the record there, that one of Obama's first acts was in fact to intensify the bombing of Pakistan, then to surge the troops into Afghanistan, extend the drone wars into Yemen and Somalia, send armed troops into Central Africa for the first time, now that we know that there is oil in Central Africa. And the reason for the peace action, the withdrawal from Iraq, was because George Bush had established that deadline, and Obama tried to negotiate an extension of criminal immunity for the soldiers, wasn't able to do it, so he reluctantly had to end the war when George Bush planned to end the war, but left to his own devices, it would still be going on right now. And not to mention that we still have twice as many troops in Afghanistan as we ever had under George Bush, and the future of that war is really very unclear now that Obama has committed us to another 10 years following the planned 2014 withdrawal, another 10 years that we're supposed to be defending the current government in Afghanistan. So not exactly the peace president we expected. In education, we are looking at basically an entire generation of students turned into indentured servants with the debt ceiling crisis, where Romney and Obama, this is how much difference there is between them. They are both promising to stay the course in that debt crisis, basically. Really do nothing to help it. They both said, oh, I'll be a hero and I'll fight the increase in tuition rate, right? Be a hero by making it not get worse, when it's already just devastating for young people. The attack on our civil liberties, is this like enough to get you quaking in your boots? If you're not, then you probably haven't heard that Obama has basically codified the violations of our civil liberties undertaken by George Bush, including indefinite detentions, targeted assassinations, now of U.S. citizens as well. I think that's beyond anything that George Bush tried to do, as well as the criminalization of protests with H.R. 347. And then the ongoing racist war on drugs, which again has been extended by this president in his attacks on medical marijuana now, which really goes beyond what George Bush did before, the ever-expanding prison industrial complex. And finally, the undermining, the plundering, really, of the environment and the climate, with the president having embraced the drill baby drill policies, expanding nuclear plants for the first time in decades. Never happened under George Bush. Wouldn't have been tolerated under George Bush. The movement would have been out there in force, and this is kind of the danger of the prevailing paradigm, you know, that the Democrats are going to save us from the Republicans, but basically they're doing the same thing, but just very diplomatically and with a smile in such a way as to undermine resistance. So we're seeing that in spades on the environment, where the president has also opened up further offshore drilling, the exploitation of fossil fuels in wilderness areas and national parks and the Arctic. It's given the green light to fracking, and then finally undermined the Durban Accords to say that we're not going to do anything until 2020. And if you follow climate science at all, you know that the goose is cooked by 2020. We can't wait till then. So when people say, oh, but the Supreme Court appointments, you know, important to point out that there's much more at stake here than half-baked Supreme Court appointments that are not going to make the difference. If you're holding your breath for the Supreme Court to save us, you know, what can I say? Good luck. So, you know, that's just sort of the laundry list of why it's really important for us to be standing up. And thankfully, this is a big wake-up moment, so that movement for democracy and justice is alive and well at the grassroots. It deserves a voice in this election and a choice at the polls that's not already bought and paid for by Wall Street, because going into the polls and voting for any of those corporate-sponsored candidates gives a mandate for 4 more years of corporate rule, and that is the definition of throwing away your vote. On the other hand, voting your values, voting for the Green Party at whatever level of office, you know, is an unsuppressible call to move us forward towards that just and sustainable future that is within our reach. So how are we going to do that? Well, it turns out it's not so hard. In fact, it's not rocket science at all. And in fact, it is what the public is already clamoring for. So this campaign is basically like handing out candy. I've run for office several times before, and it has never been like this. In the past, it was, if I showed up to a rally, it was, thank you for coming, but I'm sorry, we can't let you speak. Does that sound familiar? Some of you activists out there? Yeah. But in this race, it's like, you know, it's like all that our campaign can do to get to the rallies that have invited us, you know, not just to speak, but to really speak out as a presidential campaign, standing up on the issues, whether it's student debt or women's economic and reproductive rights. There's a whole new women's movement which is coming up out of the grassroots and out of the internet. The cannabis movement, workers' rights. You know, I was invited to a May Day celebration in Gainesville, Florida, and you know, lo and behold, they were totally into it and applauding when I went through the litany of where Barack Obama has brought working people of this country. And in just time after time, I have been so flabbergasted to see that people are saying, you know, not only do we want you to speak, but we want you to speak like a candidate and let people know that they don't have to vote for more of these predators who are, you know, really raking us over the coals. People need to know that they have a choice. So that rebellion is basically in full swing out there. It's going on right now. It's a little bit below the radar, although it's not below the radar in things like Occupy, for example, and the Wisconsin uprisings. It's very above the radar, but it is alive and well, and it's much bigger than those groups, in fact. And polls, in fact, as you probably know, show that you know, the largest plurality of voters is reliably saying they are not Democrats, they are not Republicans, and in fact they are thoroughly and utterly disgusted with what those parties and our current electeds are giving us. So, you know, it's really very exciting times right now. So our agenda, just to run through it quickly. First, we're calling for a Green New Deal. This is the centerpiece of our program. This is an emergency program to create 25 million jobs, to put an end to unemployment for once and for all, to transform the economy to the green economy of the future, and at the same time to really put a halt to climate change. And the program basically puts the power in the hands of communities to define what they need to become sustainable ecologically, but also socially and economically, because that's part of being sustainable too. We know that as Greens. So the program would provide the funding, but let communities decide what they need. And the jobs include a whole spectrum of jobs, including the typical green type jobs, clean manufacturing, local organic agriculture, public transportation, including an active component like bike paths and safe sidewalks. In Copenhagen, 40% of people bike to work because they have the structure to do it. You put that together with a local organic health food system, or I should say a healthy local organic food system, you have essentially a real healthcare system, unlike the sick care system, which is what we have now, basically spending $2 trillion a year, and most of it spent treating chronic illnesses that would be prevented for a tiny fraction of the cost if we were doing the right thing at the level of our communities by way of making it possible for people to eat good, healthy, organic food and to actually have a right to recreation and to an active transportation system that lets you recreate on the way to work, so you don't have to buy a $1,000 membership to a health club, as your means of getting recreation. You shouldn't be forced to do that. So those are the green jobs, but we also talk about the social jobs, so jobs for teachers, the hundreds of thousands of teachers who've been laid off over the last couple of years. Those are green jobs in terms of making communities sustainable. So we want to bring back the teachers and the nurses, the daycare, after school, violence prevention, drug abuse rehabilitation and prevention, affordable housing. There are more abandoned homes in this country than there are homeless people, and that is a national scandal, and we need to put an end to that too. So that is part of what we call green jobs. And we include in this not only public works and public services, like the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression. In fact, we want to ensure that instead of going down to the unemployment office, if you need a job, you just go down to the employment office, and you get paid to actually work and contribute to the community and make it healthier and more sustainable. And that's part of why this program is so affordable. The cost estimates suggest that for the price of the first stimulus package, Obama's stimulus package, which was about $800 billion, in fact, for less than that price, we could put 25 million people back to work, because the money would all go into direct job creation, not into corporate tax breaks, which is why not very many jobs were created with that program. So we could jumpstart it at the same price, but a real fix, not just something that sort of impacts around the margins, but a true fix that would get us out of this incredibly entrenched recession. They're calling it a recovery now, because you got GM coming back with, because corporate profits are up and the Dow is up, right? So it's a recovery. I don't think so, Most people don't think so, and in fact, the jobs that are coming back are low-wage, insecure, mostly service industry jobs, except for the manufacturing jobs who've had their wages cut, coming in at about 60% of what workers used to get in the GM factory. But what do you expect when you appoint the king of offshoring to the head of the Jobs Council? The head of Barack Obama's Jobs Council is Jeffrey Immelt, still the head of GE, who closed more factories and offshored more jobs than any single person imaginable. So, what exactly do you expect? But in contrast, we're talking about the Green New Deal that creates jobs which are full-time, community-based, and living wage jobs. So not only the public works and public services, but also grants and startup money for community-based small businesses. So at the same time we go green, we also relocalize and create economies that are real. They're not sort of the Wall Street fake economy of high finance. These are economies that really meet our needs, that do things, and that keep the money locally instead of offshoring it, which is what happens in a corporate multinational economy, that the dollars are always going out of town. You multiply those dollars manyfold by recirculating them within the community. We're also calling for worker cooperatives as well as small businesses as well. So the idea here is to fix the urgent problem as we jumpstart a whole new paradigm for the economy. So it's a win for employment, it's a win for a green transformation, and it's also a win for our health. And one just quick illustration of that, when Cuba's oil pipeline went down in the early 1990s, suddenly they didn't have the fuel to run tractors or fertilize their crops or put pesticides on them, things that we do with fossil fuels, and they didn't have fuel for their, for their automobiles or energy of any sort. So they had to go green overnight, practically. And what do you think happened to health in Cuba? This is in the midst of a absolute crisis, so people are unbelievably stressed economically, yet their health, like, totally went, just skyrocketed. So death rates from diabetes went down 50%. Death rates from heart disease and strokes went down about 30 to 35%. All-cause mortality went down 20%. Obesity rates went down by 50%. And all of this happened for a cost of $0. We cannot begin to get close to this with a $2 trillion healthcare system because it's a disease care system. It's not a healthcare system. And pollution prevention, I think, also counts for a lot here, too, because people were not breathing the air pollution and the contaminated water and the pesticides in their food and all the rest. So the Green New Deal is a win-win-win. It also comes, by the way, with a guarantee of health care as a human right through a Medicare for All system. And we know this not only provides coverage for everybody, it's also complete coverage, so it doesn't leave out your eyeglasses, or your hearing aid, or your teeth, or your reproductive system, or your medications, or your mental health. A few little critical details that keep getting left out of the mix. But your health is like a chain, and it's only as good as the weakest link. So the idea that you could cover some parts of the system, but not the whole system, and call it a healthcare system is pretty preposterous. So it's not only complete coverage, it's also putting you back in charge. So it's not the CEO telling you who needs to be your provider and where you're going to get care and what can be covered. You're back in charge. And it saves money, the well-kept secret. It saves a huge amount of money. Not only that 30% of every healthcare dollar right now that goes into paper pushing and red tape and bureaucracy and advertising and CEO salaries, all the things that don't make you one bit healthier, that money gets retrieved and put back into health. That's how come a Medicare for All system can expand to cover everything. And by the way, in that list must be included, and is, I should say it must be mentioned, that that list also includes chronic care, which most of us will live to see the day when we too need chronic care. And if you're not covered for chronic care, you are in deep trouble. And most people are not covered for chronic care. You've got to go into poverty, basically, and bankrupt your resources and all the rest, and your home ownership and all the rest in order to get covered in chronic care. So that's another wonderful way in which this system works. The other thing it does is stabilize medical inflation, and that's where the dollars are really saved, because the biggest driver in this skyrocketing healthcare costs that we have now is actually the inflation, just the inflation that goes with the private healthcare system. So once you're in a Medicare for All or other single-payer system, it goes away. Economists like Dean Baker have estimated that that will save us trillions of dollars over the course of the next decade. Save us trillions. So it's really pretty staggering. It's a win-win. We need to be there now. The only reason we're not there now is because Greens are not in power. If we were, we would be there now. In addition, we will put an end to student debt because we forgave the banks who caused the problem. It's time to forgive the students who were victims of that waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street. Yeah. While we're at it, we can make public higher education free. A high school degree was publicly funded as a public good throughout the 20th century because it was essential for economic security. In the 21st century, a college degree is essential for economic security. So it's time to fund that as well. We know that this is an investment that pays back many times over. How do we know that? GI Bill. GI Bill was basically, you know, publicly funded college tuition. For every dollar that taxpayers put into the GI Bill, $7 were returned to the public treasury through improved productivity and revenues and so on. So these programs are essentially investments that repay many times over. These aren't things that cost us. They actually, you know, bring the dollars in. In addition, it's time to bring the troops home, obviously, from Afghanistan and from over 1,000 bases in over 140 countries around the world. If we cut our military budget by 50%, it is still more than 3 times the size of the next biggest spender, which is China, and it's still 6 times the size of Russia. So why do we have to be spending more than the next 17 biggest military spenders all added up? We don't need to be doing that. You know, and we do that. That is the flip side of austerity. It is the flip side of, you know, this incredible crisis that we're in. And it certainly has not made us more secure when after $5 trillion approximately, and you know, what is it, like 8 or 9,000 American lives, and hundreds of thousands of civilian lives in Iraq and Afghanistan, in addition to the boycott, which was probably 1 million lives lost in Iraq. So just an incredible toll. How did we leave from Iraq? You know, after this victory, we left in the dead of night on a secret date for fear that we would be ambushed as we withdrew. So how much security exactly have we accomplished in Iraq, or the same thing in Afghanistan? So we can make ourselves much more secure by securing the climate, by securing our economy, our health care, and our education system here at home. So by downsizing the military and bringing the troops home, we'll bring hundreds of billions of dollars back into our economy, which is what we need to do. We also can put a moratorium on home foreclosures because they're not doing us any good at all. They continue to just feed the coffers of the banks, and we don't need it. 6 million families have lost their homes, another 12 million are underwater. So we need to put an end to that and require the banks to negotiate to keep families in their homes and require them to also lower the principal on the mortgage. They created this crisis that devalued homes, so they need to pitch in here. Likewise, we will also, we've proposed breaking up the banks that are too big to fail, because they will fail again. We've just seen with JP Morgan that we are not out of harm's way here. Exactly. So in their place, the banks that are too big to fail, in their place we can create public banks like North Dakota has that enable them to weather the storm economically much better and ensure that we have the money to be investing in our small businesses and the Green New Deal and all the rest. Just a couple more to add. It's time to respect immigrant rights as human rights, unlike this president with his so-called Secure Communities program, which is basically a deportation and racial profiling program that has deported 1 million immigrants, essentially. Immigrants who are almost overwhelmingly, who are upstanding members of their communities and key parts of their economies as well. So we need to put a halt to that and provide a welcoming legal path to citizenship for the immigrant members of our community. And finally, we need to legalize marijuana because it is a substance that is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous. And on day one of the, of a green administration, we could instruct the FDA to actually use science as the basis for listing, scheduling drugs. So that would very quickly lead to the unlisting of marijuana and of hemp, which would again provide a very important resource to our communities, for our local economies, for agriculture, for nutrition, for biofuel potentially, for manufacturing. I mean, the list is endless of the uses to which hemp can be put. It's like a gold mine that the public has been barred from using, so very important to open up that resource as well. So this is basically where people are. In poll after poll, the public supports all of these policies by large majorities. And why aren't we there? You know, well, there are prohibitive ballot access rules, and thanks to Blair and the Oregon State Green Party for filing this legal case to overturn these restrictive ballot access rules. In addition, you know, there is the reality of a fear campaign and a smear campaign as well against third parties, which, you know, is fundamentally all about fear and all about telling us that we have to be very afraid of going into the voting booth and actually voting our values, of standing up for what we believe, what we deserve, and what we, you know, desperately, urgently need in order to have a future, not only for our younger generation, but even for ourselves, because the you know, the hammer is falling that quickly in the consequences of these, you know, just desperately wrong policies on the economy, you know, the planet, the whole 9 yards. We are at that breaking point. We need to fix it, yet they're telling us we need to be very afraid of fixing it. And we need to go into the voting booth and pull the lever for more of the same. But the reality is, you know, and again, as you're having these discussions with your friends and colleagues, the reality is, following that policy over the last 10 years, you know, we got a lot of data points there. We have a lot of evidence about where this leads, and in no uncertain terms, we can see that silence is not an effective political strategy. Surprise, surprise. And that the politics of fear has actually delivered everything that we were afraid of. The expanding wars, the meltdown of the climate, the attack on our civil liberties, the declining workers' wages, the utterly obscene extremes in wealth between the 1% and everybody else. You know, the rising rates of poverty. 1 out of every 2 Americans now is either in or approaching poverty more rapidly by the day. 1 out of every 2. This is from recent census data, yes, is either in poverty or close to it. So, you know, you get beyond our circles of activists, and people out there are just, you know, on fire about the incredible insecurities in their lives. And, you know, so it really hits home in a big way that, in fact, we need to answer the politics of fear with the politics of courage and take a lesson from history. Because how is it that we have ever moved forward? There has always been a social movement working in alliance with an independent political party that's not part of the mainstream. So the abolition of slavery had the Liberty Party. Women's right to vote had the Women's Party. The right to organize unions, to have safe workplaces and the 40-hour work week and child labor laws, they all had the socialist, the labor, and the progressive parties. Independent parties have always helped articulate the agenda, the vision, and the demands. Because as Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. Well, guess what? You need that demand in the political arena. If you don't have it, you get exactly what we've been getting, which is just this unmitigated slide towards corporatism and the police state and the attack on our civil liberties and, you know, the incredibly exploitive, unsustainable economy, the whole 9 yards. That's what you get if you don't have the voice of the public interest to drive real solutions forward. Otherwise, you just have a public relations campaign, a battle of the public relations campaigns among corporate-sponsored candidates. That's what we are getting, in fact, from the political debate now, if our voices are not in the mix. So, you know, it's not only okay to vote for a third party, it's like the only thing that is okay if you really want to have a future. And I think that is the way to stand up to this fear-mongering, to just like do a little reality check with people about where this politics of fear has taken us. And, you know, fundamentally that is what our campaign is about, is reclaiming our political voice and our political courage. So tonight I'm inviting you to join the campaign, to be the campaign. It's a grassroots campaign. It's unbelievably exciting. When we launched the campaign, we actually went to a university in Western Illinois, where we went because I was called up by a young woman who introduced herself as my campaign manager at the university, because they were having a mock election, which they have somewhere in the Midwest at a college or university every 4 years. They had done it once before at this college. And people pay attention to it because it tends to predict the outcome of the election. Now remember that. Because what happened, I went there, she said, you gotta come, I'm your campaign manager, you need to be here for our election. So I said, yes ma'am. We went there to launch the election. I had 6 minutes to make our case, and I ran through that when you graduate you don't have to worry whether you will have a job. It's a question of what kind of job you will have. You don't have to worry about your debt, because your debt is getting wiped out. And you don't have to worry about the rest of your tuition, because that too is getting wiped out. That we are bringing the troops home, you will have health care as a human right, and that we are also legalizing marijuana. So in 6 minutes, we went from 3% in the polls to, I was hoping for like 10%. I thought that would be a really good, boost. We went from 3% to 27% in a 3-way race. That's practically a tie in a 3-way race. It took 6 minutes in a school that had never voted progressive, green, independent, or lefty in any way. And remember, the outcome of these mock elections in Midwestern universities tends to predict the outcome of the election. So that to me was the first heads up that the chemistry of the electorate had really profoundly changed. This was back in, I think, October. And if that was the only case in point, that would have been that, just one little oddity. But the reality is that has been sort of our experience that has been repeated time after time in just about every public forum and rally that we've been at, that our campaign is not treated like some, oddity, some kind of fringe party. We're really, embraced like what the public interest is all about. And the big question is whether we can use the strategies and the tactics of Tahrir Square and Tunisia, which basically went viral, which organized on the internet, and which basically, turned history on its head. Who would have thought 3 weeks even before Tahrir Square happened or Tunisia happened that anything like that was even possible? So when people say to me, well, of course you don't expect to win, I say, well, I'm not holding my breath, but on the other hand, I'm not ruling it out, because these are utterly extraordinary times, and in some ways we've already won, because the public is actually where we are. We don't have to convince people that they need a right to a living wage job, that they need a right to health care, that they need a right to affordable public higher education, that we should bring the troops home. I mean, this is like common knowledge. This is what the public is already impassioned about. So the question is not whether we can convince people, it's whether we can get the word out. And I have to just quote Alice Walker here for a minute, who had this other wonderful quote, that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing they have it to start with. Well, people are waking up to the fact that we actually do have the power. We are the majority. Most people in public opinion polls actually support the principles of the Occupy movement. It is here. Our progressive democratic friends are having, the wake-up call of their lifetime. I expected to be incredibly harangued, about being a nasty third-party candidate who should just get out of the way. And knock on wood, I'm just not hearing it, like hardly at all. I have to really go looking for it, because, the people who used to say that know that it's just not true. It's just not true at all, and that both parties have really abandoned ship here. So, it's an incredibly exciting moment. If you go to the website and you sign up, we can get you plugged in to help us go viral. And at the end of the day, that is what it's about. It's also about, and you can do that basically, if you sign up as a volunteer, you'll get our newsletter, and you can basically pass that around. You can use that as a tool for networking. You can like us on Facebook, and then just be part of the growing Facebook network for the campaign. And we are also close to making matching funds, federal matching funds. So taxpayers, you know, when you do your federal income tax, you can check the box for campaign finance. And so we are close, and we would love for Oregon to be one of our 20 states that helps us qualify. We have to raise $5,000 in each of 20 states. We are about halfway there now in states that have fully qualified, and we are close in the other 10. And Oregon is somewhere between halfway and 3/4 of the way. So if you are able, you know, to contribute, you can write a check to Jill Stein for President. You can also go on the website and make a contribution online and help us get to matching funds. Any contribution up to $250 will be matched dollar for dollar. If you have really, really deep pockets, you can actually contribute up to $2,500 legally. And we accept campaign contributions as long as you're not a lobbyist or the CEO of a corporation that hires lobbyists, because we don't accept money that comes with strings attached to it. So those are our criteria for avoiding you know, money with an axe to grind. Barring that, you can contribute up to $2,500, but whatever you contribute, you know, you're a hero for doing what you can do. And you know, there must be, what, 30 people, 40 people in the room here? And you know, it doesn't take that much of a contribution among 40 people to actually get us the rest of the way, and that's about $2,500. So if people do what they can, and then tell your friends, you know, that networking for peace, because where are we going to get if not for the Green Party, etc. So ballot access, that money that we get from the matching funds will be used for ballot access drives, and there are some very difficult states. We're currently on the ballot in 22 states. We have not yet missed a single ballot access threshold or deadline. So we're doing really well, and the state parties are doing great. People are really mobilizing because, you know, just of the incredible opportunity of the moment. So we're really seeing state parties come back where they've been dormant. We're seeing them form where, you know, they haven't existed for at least the last 10 years in New Mexico, in New Hampshire, in Vermont, in other states where the Greens just disappeared. They are back and working hard to get on the ballot. We have some really tough ballot access drives. In Pennsylvania, we need about 50 or 60,000 signatures, and they will take you to court to try to challenge your signatures, and they will charge you for all the lawyers' fees on that, on the other side if you don't win your case. So we got to be really sure that we have our ducks in order on that one. So at any rate, that money, we need to qualify soon because we've got to put the money into these really difficult drives on the ground to be sure that we make it. So that's the urgency to meeting that that matching fund threshold. Once we've met it, the feds continue to match every dollar that we raise up to $250. So it's really terrific. It ends in July at the time of our convention. So think you know, think early and often. Whatever you can contribute, do it now, and as quickly as possible, because pretty soon it won't get matched. You know, and then just the last point, I guess, can't say too much. Register for the Green Party, because at the end of the day, this doesn't end in November. Whether we win the office and turn the White House into a greenhouse, which would be a really cool thing, or we just win the day by driving these issues into the public dialogue and forcing the hand of the political establishment to actually deal with them. Because once you get Medicare for all back on the table and into the daylight, it can't be stopped, because people want it, and it will save us money, and drastically improve our health and make our businesses far more competitive and sustainable, and they won't be going bankrupt. It's motherhood and apple pie. So to put it on the table will really drive the issues forward. And that's what we can do together in this campaign. It is a no-lose proposition. We win it however it comes out. Whatever the vote count is, that's a win, and it will move us forward. So in this election, we hope to turn a breaking point into a tipping point and start to take back the promise of our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that really is within our reach now. Thank you.